Hey there, Den of Geek fans. Aaron Sagers here, and I am from the Travel Channel show Paranormal Caught on Camera, as well as host of the Nightmarica True Crime and Paranormal podcast. So I'm excited to be here today with all of you guys. And, occasionally a film comes along that really captures the spirit of the moment, that taps into the zeitgeist. And I would say, arguably, that is definitely Host. And this film that's now streaming on Shudder was made remotely over 12 weeks during this crazy lockdown time that we are all a part of. And Host is about a group of friends who hold a virtual séance over Zoom. And actually, the séance occurs on July 30th, 2020. And that is, interestingly enough, when the movie premiered on Shudder. So this movie, very timely, and it currently enjoys a 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And I would say it is likewise a fresh entry for the horror genre in the way that Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity were also these fresh entries. It's also creepy as hell, which is what you want out of a horror movie. So I would say, coming from the paranormal perspective of things, it also has a lot of paranormal influences in it. And with all of that said, I'm very excited to bring in the director. We're going to chat for about an hour and even see if you guys have any questions. So he can't really hear your round of applause. So let's just give a virtual round of applause to director Rob Savage. Rob, hey man, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. How's it going?
It's going great. I'm loving the Suspiria shirt.
Oh yeah, I thought I'd represent.
Yeah, I'm wearing like a tiki horror shirt, so I'm glad that
nice.
You brought your horror threads though.
I like your Ouija board in the background.
There's a couple of them actually. That's an antique one, and then that one's just more of the current Parker Brothers one. But yeah, shrunken heads, all sorts of strange things back.
Can I ask you a Ouija board question?
Of course.
When they were first manufactured as Ouija boards, or was that like a name that was applied afterwards? I was trying to research this. Like, what were they called originally?
Yeah, so Ouija is a brand name. That was the patented name.
Yeah.
Well, and before it was even Hasbro, it was William Fuld, one of the creators of Ouija. That was who patented it. Hasbro came along, or Parker Brothers, and then Hasbro later came along and bought it. But before then, it was a spiritualist's communication device that could be known as a witch board, a spirit board, a talking board, and it could be where you just write down a set of letters on a platform or a table, and then you could even have just like a glass that would move over the table.
Yeah, that's how me and my friends used to do it, with like an upturned wine glass and bits of paper.
Yeah, anything pretty much works. Although wine glass sounds, I mean, spirits and spirits, man, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, cool. and I love the Ouija story. It's really one of those American entrepreneurial stories, even outside of the creepy gateways or whatever that you want to look at. It was a success story. But let's talk a little bit about your success story of Host. Congratulations on this, man. You've been getting so much buzz around this movie, and rightfully so.
Thank you.
It all just sort of began with something potentially creepy happening in your own attic and a prank that went viral, correct?
Yeah. Well, it basically all started before lockdown, and I just moved into this new flat, and I checked out all the rooms, and I'd moved everything in, but I didn't have like a stepladder to go and check in the attic, so I just decided not to bother with that. And then I started hearing like these weird, creepy noises from upstairs, and it's right above my bedroom where I am now, and I would hear literally like the sound of footsteps going from one side to the other. But I'm clearly like the idiot that dies first in every horror movie, because I didn't bother checking it out. I just was like, oh, okay. And then lockdown happens, and suddenly I'm trapped in a house with potentially a serial killer living in my attic. So I decided I needed to go and check it out. So I borrowed a stepladder from my next door neighbor. I went up there, and there was nothing there. There was no serial killer, nothing spooky. But the attic itself was creepy as fuck. And so I was like, okay, I can use this to scare my friends. And we were already like everyone was doing, we were doing Zoom happy hours and quizzes and
Mhm.
all kind of stuff. So at the next Zoom meeting, I was like, guys, I'm hearing noises from my attic. I really need you guys for like emotional support while I go and check it out. And, you know, if there's someone up there, you can call the police. Got them to all record it as well, just so they had evidence in case some, you know, an axe murderer buried his axe in my forehead. And, but what I'd done actually, I'll show you, I built this like horrible contraption that I could attach onto the front of my laptop. And what I was able to do is I had the Zoom call on my phone,
Mhm.
and then I was able to just put my hand in front of the camera for a second, slot it in theory. And then this was at the perfect distance from my laptop screen, so you didn't see the edges, and I could just play some
Yeah.
pre-recorded footage. And I played them a clip from this movie Wreck, the found
Yeah.
footage movie where a cameraman puts his camera up into an attic that looks suspiciously like mine, and a zombie child jumps out and eats his face off. So they reacted as though they'd just seen one of their friends get eaten by a zombie and freaked the fuck out. And we filmed it all, and I put it on YouTube and put it on Twitter, and like kind of blew up. We got like 7 million views, and it was this big thing. And like, you know, I mean, the buzz went away after a couple of days, but we were still really high off it. Me and my friends, we thought
Mhm.
that was going to be the one cool thing that came out of lockdown. But with that came this whole wave of attention, and people, companies kind of asking, well, is there a longer version of this? You know, a lot of people didn't realize it was a prank video. They thought it was something that I'd made myself and constructed, you
Mhm.
know, as a short film. And we were like, sure, you know, at the beginning of lockdown, everyone would be kind of like taking the piss and saying like, oh, well, who's going to be the first person to make a film entirely on Zoom? And then we were a couple of
Yeah.
months in, and no one had done it. So we were like, well, fuck it, we may as well be the ones to do it. And we started throwing ideas around, and then it really started to come together. I called Jed Shepard, who's one of the writers and the co-EP on it, and we've worked together on a bunch of short films before. He's
Yeah.
just got a great mind for horror, and we threw a few ideas around about what a feature version could look like, and we kind of like circled a few things, but we didn't arrive at anything. And then I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and Jed had been up until like 4 in the morning, and he just texted me 2 words. He texted me Zoom seance. It was like, oh, great, let's just do that. That's great.
Yeah.
Because we kind of wanted something quite classical to combine with this very up-to-date platform, you know. So we thought a seance and that kind of old school ghost story vibe would gel well.
Well, and I recall seeing the initial viral video, and as a horror junkie myself, like I know the movie Wreck, but because it happened so fast, you don't process that that's what it is. Until maybe a little bit later. But I can't be interested in the paranormal and not follow up with whatever happened to whatever's in the attic. Did it stop? Did it dissipate? Or is it ongoing?
You know what? I haven't actually noticed it recently, but maybe it's because I'm so exhausted now. Every day I just fall into bed and go straight to sleep. So maybe it's going on. You know, it always happened like 2 or 3 in the morning. You'd start to hear the noises, but I'm normally just like passed out in bed then. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd rather not know. We've done a whole bunch of seances since then, which are probably only going to piss it off if there is something there.
Yeah, well, what's really going to happen is it's going to want a percentage of host. You know,
that's fair.
Or a producer credit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this idea of so the monster, the spirit. You kind of answered this, but you kind of went to ghost or demon pretty much right away, and you also had I believe his name was James Swanton, who portrays that spirit in the movie. It seems like you already had access to people that were ready to be stunt coordinators, people that were ready to be a monster, and then also all of the actors that some of them were part of the original Zoom call where you pulled the prank.
Yeah. I mean, basically everyone on that prank call worked on the movie. You know, our costume designer was on it. Our VFX supervisor was on it. Everyone you need to make a movie was basically on that prank call. So it was very fortuitous that we were able to just jump back on a Zoom call with our buddies and say, do you fancy making a movie? And I've forgotten the question that you asked. I'm just rambling now. What were you...
Oh, no, just, I think you pretty much answered it.
No,
a bit of a friend affair.
Yeah, but it is worth saying that actually the reason to pull in all these people like Jason and like, you know, the people who did the stunts, you know, one of the reasons we had access to this amazing talent was because of the lockdown and because everyone was on furlough. And we had this kind of like amazing light bulb moment at the beginning where we realized anyone with an internet connection could suddenly be a part of our movie. There are certain restrictions shooting remotely, but actually it kind of opens up the whole world. And we, you know, this film was made, there are people who worked on this film who I've never met before. You know, I hadn't met Teddy until we did the wrap party in Greenwich Park last weekend. We'd shot the whole movie and I'd never met him. I'd only interacted via Zoom. And, you know, so it was really freeing actually, being like, well, I know somebody in, you know, Norfolk who can fall out of a window. Let's get them to dress up as one of the characters and shoot that stunt, and we can stitch it into the movie. So it's, you know, there's a lot to be done with it, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, Zoom itself as a device, obviously it's a part of our lives now. And I think something that's really compelling is we know not to go inside the haunted house, or I mean, I would happily go inside the haunted house, but in horror movie terms, you know, that's the, you can avoid that if you choose to, but Zoom in this everyday pandemic quarantine life, you can't avoid Zoom.
Yeah.
This is a powerful tool for connection, but it's also a necessity in business and everything now.
Yeah.
What were some of the other ways that you tapped into that?
I think, you know, like the thing that you're always trying to do, you know, I've said this before, but like the thing you're always trying to do as a horror director is basically try and find a way to make the film nest in people's heads, and so much that they take it home with them. You know, that's the ultimate aim, is, you know, when they're turning off their bedside lamp, they're still thinking about the movie and they're still looking into the darkness and thinking about the images you've conjured. And it's really hard to do that. You know, there's only a handful of films that have done that for me. And we just saw this opportunity of like everyone, for, you know, for hopefully the only time in history, or for a long time, everyone is living the same reality pretty much. We're all locked at home. We're all following similar daily routines. We're all using the same platforms. There's something to tap into here that we can exploit, you know, as horror filmmakers. We can find ways to take this current situation and make people feel even less safe in their homes, which seemed like a good idea to us.
Yeah. Well, you know, host also captures sort of the helplessness of isolation, that as you're watching someone, if something were to happen across that Zoom connection, you're not, it's a way of substituting, of fabricating this notion of being together, but we're not really together. You are ultimately helpless.
Yeah.
And yet it also kind of perfectly taps into that old horror movie rule of, when you separate, when you break up and go your different ways, you're suddenly a target. Well, they're already on their own.
Yeah. That's the great thing. They don't realize, but they've already separated and they've already wandered off. And you know, that horror cliche of let's split up and look around, they're already living that current reality. And that was the thing we really wanted to do. Like, we didn't really want this to be a movie that touched on the virus or anything icky like that, because that felt a little bit much and a little bit distasteful. So, but we wanted it to be a movie about how it feels to be in isolation and to not really connect with other people in a face-to-face way for an extended period of time. And you know, the fear we were trying to play on is this idea of like feeling like you're in this communal space and you're with your friends, but actually you have these stark reminders that you're on your own. It's like when you're on a Zoom call and suddenly your connection cuts out and then you're just sitting there in your own silence. And it's creepy, and it's not a substitute for face-to-face interaction. It's got a weird, you know, it's a different way of doing things. And it was that kind of texture we wanted to pick up on and make it very specific to how people are feeling right now.
Well, there's, you know, the horror genre is known for having rules. You know, there's the movie Scream obviously did a great job of documenting those. But within this, you know, there's some classic rules. Don't haunt the spirit. You should take it seriously. Things like that. Did you find, were you conscious of the fact that this was sort of a parallel to rules of the pandemic as well? Socially distance, wear a mask, do this, don't do that. And if you don't follow those rules, if you break those rules, even if one person does it, it kind of screws us all over.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that was what we were going for, and of course that was probably on our minds. But I think the actual reality is that now real life is following horror movie rules rather than the other way around. I think, you know, the template that we used is a kind of standard horror movie template, which we thought was, you know, there's lots of stuff there's lots of stuff that we put in there that are kind of classic tropes that feel a bit more fresh when told in this context. The idea of masks, the idea of breaking rules, of somebody not taking something seriously and that causing damage to the group. You know, all those things you spoke about. We kind of knew that was that those were kind of potent metaphors, but that wasn't really what we were leading into. I think it was just about. Yeah, you know, I mean, it was all there, but it was never our first intention. We kind of wanted this to be a fun kind of roller coaster ghost movie that that was just taking place now, and that where these characters were living the reality that you as the audience were living.
But just out of curiosity, was your entire cast based in the UK?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so I saw Carolyn Ward mention in a tweet that she was even applying prosthetics over Zoom, that she was being coached on that.
Yeah.
Which is just like, I hadn't quite thought about it. Obviously, I thought about the stunts, but I hadn't thought about, you know, the prosthetic element to it.
She did great there. Yeah, we had Dan Martin, our special effects person, who again is just, you know, he's Ben Wheatley's guy. He's just done Brandon Cronenberg's new movie. I've worked with him a couple of times, but he's super busy, and I don't think we would have been able to get him unless lockdown had happened. And he was, of course, willing to throw in and willing to be a part of it. But it was just one of these things of like, nobody's ever done this before. How do you make this work? And he put together a little kind of tutorial video for Caroline, and he sent her across all these prosthetic pieces, these like latex pieces, and he gave her some test ones as well. So she applied that with him, and they did like half a day just as a little tutorial. And then on the day, I think we spent almost the whole day doing just that scene, because it was literally like she had a little thin pillow like resting on her laptop, and, you know, a bunch of blood in a bucket next to her, and she'd put on the first one, like a little crack on her nose, and she'd slam her head down a few times, and then she'd put on another piece, and she'd have to apply that, and that would take about half an hour, and we'd bloody that up, and then she'd go down, and so we could cut it with the illusion that every time her head slams down, it comes back up, and she's got a fresh gash. So you know, it was a slow process, but like all of the cast, because they were our friends, were just so up for it, and they so wanted this movie to be as good as it possibly could be, and they were so happy to take on all these other roles.
Were you directing entirely remotely, or were you able to be on location with?
No, I never left my house. And actually,
geez, man.
Yeah, and actually we filmed some of it in my house. Like, you know, so Emma's house is actually 5 houses stitched together with clever edits and VFX. So her bedroom is her bedroom, but then she goes down the stairs and we do a transition, and she actually ends up in my kitchen. And it's so the whole bit with the floating mask and the flower and the cupboards exploding, that's all me shooting it with fishing wire on my own, dressed as Emma in her pink bunny slippers. And so I had to black out my house for the duration of this 2-week shoot, so I could shoot these nighttime scenes. And so I was basically living in this little bunker with no daylight getting in, not knowing what time of day it was. It was very, I think we all went a little mad, but in a good way.
Well, we all go a little mad sometimes.
I was setting you up for that.
Thanks. That was a softball. I appreciate that. So were any of the actors able to play off of one another in the scenes, or was it all just you and them?
It was all via Zoom. So what we did is we didn't record on Zoom itself. We set up a meeting. Everyone was on Zoom. I was there. I was hidden. You know, I'd be able to. I'd give them my direction at the start of the take. I'd be able to unmute myself and come in and give a bit of direction if the scene needed a bit of steering, or, you know, or even sometimes I'd be like typing dialogue in the chat, so they'd have like lines just being thrown at them. So it was a really kind of like rock and roll process of filming it. But we didn't actually use that Zoom call. That Zoom call was almost just like my video village. That was where I could look, kind of like keep an eye on all the shots. But actually we got them all iPhones that they could attach just with Velcro, like behind the laptops, so that the camera was pointing out just over the top of the laptop camera, and they filmed on that in slightly higher resolution, and also, you know, with no connection to the internet. So if the internet dropped out for a moment, we wouldn't like lose the footage or anything. We'd have it backed up. But it did mean that then we had to basically all of the Zoom grids, every single little asset, you know, so and so has joined the meeting. We had to make all of that and put that together. It ended up being like over 4,000 individual assets, which had to be individually timed and placed to build that kind of the illusion that you're on a Zoom call.
Well, but it's also it's a different thing. But I've been filming a show remotely from within my
Mm,
apartment. I'm based in Brooklyn,
yeah,
and it really obviously I miss having sound people, hair and makeup, and everything. But
yeah,
this time has really kind of taught us that maybe we don't have to be as complicated all the time, or it doesn't always have to be a big production, or there are ways to we can do a lot with
yeah,
a iPhone that can shoot on 4K. Is that kind of
totally.
liberating for you as a filmmaker that going
Oh,
forward you've taught
yeah.
yourself that I can do this?
This is where I come from. I mean, I started making movies as a one-man band with a camera on my shoulder
Yeah,
and a sound person, and that's it. And like, and I've honestly, until this point, I've never, in 10 years of working in film and TV and commercials, I've never felt as creative in any of those jobs as I did when I started out and we were making these no budget movies where I was doing everything, and it was, and everyone who was involved for the love, and just doing multiple jobs, and those kind of like student productions are so there's so much kind of possibility in them, and the way that you approach every day is like there's a sense of discovery there that I think you lose on bigger productions out of necessity, because you've got so much money riding on them, and you've got 100 cast and crew, and you can't just be trying shit out. So when you've got a smaller production, you can have more fun, and you can say, well, this
yeah.
doesn't work. I know it says it in the script here, but that doesn't mean we have to shoot something bad just because it's in the script. We can try something else out. And and it depends on what kind of movie. Like, I wouldn't want to see Lawrence of Arabia shot on an iPhone, but there's lots of narratives that I think would work well in a more lo-fi way. And actually, there's some great examples of big budget Hollywood found footage, but to be honest, like, I prefer the kind of scuzzier, like low budget
Hmm.
found footage where it feels like it's actually shot on the camera that the character, or the phone or whatever, like on Blair Witch, all shot on DV or VHS or whatever they shot on. There's something so polished about those big budget Hollywood found footage movies where you've got the person is always framing perfectly, and there's focus pulls, and everything's pin sharp. And I think actually shooting in such a lo-fi way brings an energy, and it brings a realism that they can't touch for all the money in the world. They can't touch the feeling of some of these great low budget found footage movies, and and even out of found footage, just movies that are made because the technology is available to us now. Anyone can get their hands on a camera that can shoot an image good enough to project on a big screen, and they can tell more interesting stories.
One thing that I was really impressed with was the kind of the character development, even over
Mm,
Zoom, and that's why I was even asking if anybody was able to directly act opposite one another via
mm,
Zoom. But for instance, Gemma and Haley, it seems like there is that tension
yeah.
between those two characters. Were you was there any kind of backstory that you had given to these actors, or anything that they had developed themselves about who fictional Haley is? Because I know everybody was using
Yeah.
their first name. Um, any kind of backstories to those characters?
Yeah, we went into all of that. I basically the week before we started shooting, I spent a day with each of the cast just talking over kind of everything. We set their lighting, we set the camera positions, we set costume, but we also talked about their kind of motivations in each scene. So what I did is that we didn't have a conventional script. We had kind of like a 17-page
Hmm.
beat sheet, like an outline. And then
Yeah.
within that, I'd speak to all of the girls and I'd give them their kind of objectives in the scene. So I'd say, Radina, you're the skeptical one. You're trying to calm Caroline down. Gemma, you're trying to undermine Haley. So they'd all have these objectives within the scene. And then also we came together a couple of times that week as a group and talked about backstory. We talked about the fact that they'd met at university, and that Emma joined them later because she worked at a gym with Teddy, and like all this stuff that doesn't make it into the movie, but feels like, when you watch them as a group of friends, you feel like there's a history there. And, the Gemma and Haley thing was one that we really wanted to pitch right. We wanted it to be like when you're in a group of friends, and when you're all there, there's like a nice, easy dynamic. But if you are suddenly hanging out one-on-one with that one person
Hmm.
in the group, it's just a bit weird, and there's a bit of tension, so we didn't want it to be like big, over the top backstory. But, another one is like, Caroline and Teddy, we came up with a little story about them having having a little fling, and Caroline still holding a bit of a flame for Teddy, and you know, which is why there's some great reaction shots when Ginny's on screen from Caroline, because she's got all that kind of history in the back of her head as she's doing it, and she plays it so beautifully.
Yeah, I've watched it twice now, and I picked up a little bit more of that the second time, and sort of the nonverbal. It's uncanny because as a movie, it both demands your attention, but it kind of lulls you into this sense of familiarity, like you are on a actual Zoom, where it's easy to, and this is not a criticism, this is a compliment, where you can almost tune out a little bit because you're like, oh, okay, you know, I might check my phone on a real Zoom happy hour. But it demands your attention. It makes you go back and watch it again.
Yeah, that's it. I think we didn't want it to feel like, I just really hate exposition and, you know, over exposition, and people, you know, anything that felt like a line or anything that felt like a film moment, we tried to go the other way, or we tried to like come at it in a slightly different way, or just undermine it as well. They're such funny guys as well in real life, just to undercut it with a bit of humor. Like when Salen first comes on and she's telling them the rules, you know, I came up with this idea of the astral plane drinking game, just so that we're giving the audience information, but it's not like I'm just looking down the lens and talking to the audience and saying, here's the rules. We've got something that's fun and that's interesting going on while we're also being spoon fed some information. So I think there's always like a fun way of coming at it, especially when you've got a good team like that who can improvise and just have that natural energy.
Well, I read that you actually attended some spiritualist seances for research prior to this film. What was that experience like for you? Did you walk away a believer? Was there anything kind of creepy or paranormal moments that you actually experienced?
Not so much. I mean, I thought nothing happened directly to me. I mean, I saw a lot of I mean, basically, like I made a horror TV movie for British TV like 5 years ago, and as part of my research for that, I met with mediums, and I joined their spiritualist church for about 6 months, and so every Wednesday I'd go and do these seances, and like the thing that I thought was interesting is just that they weren't really like seances that I'd seen in films before. Like a lot of the seances we did with the lights on, and it was a very kind of like friendly like atmosphere, and it was a very positive atmosphere, and it was almost like kind of group therapy for some people who are working through real loss. And like the mediums were just like normal people. They were teachers, they were single moms, they were whatever, but had this other life. And every Wednesday night they'd go from being, you know, a mum of 5 to being like a rock star, being the medium for the night. And it just felt like a really interesting world that it's been represented a lot in movies, but it hasn't been authentically represented in any film that I've seen. Just how different it is when it's grounded and real. And you know, we one of the things we did for the movie as well is we hired a real medium friend of mine to come on a Zoom call and do a Zoom seance with the cast. And actually, that's the closest I've had to something a proper supernatural experience on the Zoom seance, because a lot of the stuff that's in the movie in that first half like actually happened to us in the seance. So I mean, the first thing, and the one that freaked me out is I was, you know, on these Zoom seances, one of the things you have to do is call out individually. You have to say, you know, spirits, I make this a place of welcoming for you. Give me a sign if you're here. And we went around one by one, and I said that, and my cupboard like slammed, which it went from being a bit of fun to being properly scary in a moment. And then Gemma had. And maybe she was pranking us, and she's keeping it going all this time. But at the time, it seemed very real. She had a big like Tolkien-sized like book come off her shelf, and she had a proper like panic attack and started crying. And again, maybe it's a prank like in the movie, but we basically had to shut down the seance then. And just as we were starting to shut down the seance, the medium's internet went out and was gone for the whole night. So she had to call me up, and I had to like relay to everyone how we would shut this seance down. And I mean, we probably ballsed it up because I didn't know what I was doing. So it's probably still open right now. But yeah, so again, so a lot of that became material for the movie.
So if weird shit starts happening in my place right now, I'll have you to blame for this.
Well,
But
I guess it can travel through the internet. We've proved that. So everyone watching is probably haunted now. I'm really sorry.
well, I mean, and there is legitimately these theories within the paranormal field that there's really no difference between acting, performing a seance for the camera versus
Yeah.
doing it for real.
Yeah.
And I mean, have you thought about maybe while you were filming this, actually, what if, you're
Yeah.
tapping into something there?
Well, maybe. I mean, Emma from the movie has been having a lot of weird things happen at her house. I think we've sent her some. Oh, I don't know. We actually did a group séance the other day as a promotional thing with this exorcist that I know called R.H. Davis, who did a great show for us, and she suggested a few things that Emma could burn and put around her house to like ward off
sage,
anything.
salts,
Yeah,
things like that,
and some crystally things, and
yeah.
So yeah, Emma's been having a bit of ghostly trouble, but no, I mean that was one of the ways that I kind of decided to fuck with the actors a little bit. Is I said to them, like, we're saying the words, we're lighting the candles, we're acting it out. As far as the spirits are concerned, we're doing a real séance. So I told them, to make this safe, what I've done is I've cast a real medium in the part of the medium. And Saylan's not a medium. I just told them that because I wanted them to like treat her with I wanted her to have a certain atmosphere when she came on, and I wanted them to be a little on edge. So what we did is we got Saylan to come in, and at the end of every day, Saylan would come onto the Zoom call. She'd get everyone to close their eyes, do the breathing, shut down the seance, and tell them, we're all safe now. And then when Saylan gets cut off, and when the really scary stuff starts happening to the girls without Saylan there, I stopped bringing Saylan in. I said, "Oh, we can't get in touch with Saylan. I don't know what's happened to her." And so, as far as the girls were concerned, they were kind of in a real séance for the second half of the shoot, and I think that just made everything much more intense.
Well, and that's something that I really appreciated about the film was, so I've interacted with a lot of mediums, and some are a little bit more theatrical than others, and
yeah.
But there are, within that spiritualist community, because it is sort of almost like a religious philosophy for them.
Yeah.
It's not always this dramatic thing. It is, as you said, it's just normal people, and this is a part of their life, and this provides some guidance for them. And the character of Saylan is, she's not overly creepy. She's not overly, laying it on thick. It's just sort of matter of fact and sort of chill. And then she gets a delivery, So that's kind of relatable. I did find that to be kind of true to what most people in that community are like.
Yeah. I think that matter of factness, and that, that was the thing that really took a bit of adjusting for me when I started going to these seances, is the way how it's just how kind of accepted this way of thinking was, and it was just a part of their lives. And they talked about the spirits being around them in the same way that they talk about, spotting somebody somebody in town. It's like they're just an ever-present part of their lives. And we kind of just wanted it to not feel like, the medium comes in and we go dun dun dun, and it feels like we're entering a horror movie suddenly. We wanted it all to feel like quite low key, quite grounded, and also for her to be like quite a kind of warm presence as well, because I don't think you expect that she's quite she's got quite a kind of positive, like laid back, lovely vibe to her, Saylan, which is why I wanted to work with her on this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it comes across. She's a really good character out of all these excellent actors that you have in there. Just out of curiosity, there's been a lot of the New York Times wrote about it. It's been part of conversation that, like, you've been getting all this publicity. Kind of process that a little bit. It's kind of this strange thing to emerge out of, let's face it, a pretty difficult time. Speak to that a little bit, just about your reaction of getting all this publicity and everything.
It's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. We honestly didn't know if anyone was going to watch this movie. I didn't know I didn't know if it was any good when we put it out there. We were so close to it. I knew that I kind of liked it and I found it fun, but then, you know, I'm watching my friends. So I'm going to have fun watching it either way. I didn't know if people would click with it. I didn't know if it was scary. And also, like, you know, we're releasing it on Shudder. We're releasing it on a genre specific platform, which is great. And, you know, I'd rather horror fans, you know, get on board with this than anyone else, because we made this for horror fans. We're big horror fans. We basically just made the movie that we'd want to see in lockdown. But the fact that it's been able to transcend that and enter the kind of public conversation is amazing, and it's something that we never thought would happen. And it's also like totally surreal, because we're still I'm in my bedroom now, which is where I directed a lot of the movie. I pretty much sat in exactly the same place. So there is this sense of like, I haven't moved anywhere, but all this crazy stuff is happening, and it feels strangely disconnected. It's amazing. But we've got some cinema screenings lined up in the UK, because we've got our cinemas open. It's doing a little cinema run over here, and I'm going to go and introduce it at a few places. And I think being able to sit in the back of the cinema and see people's shoulders jump when the scares happen, I think it's going to hit me a bit more then that you know, if anyone actually turns up. But you know, seeing it with an audience, it's been wild, and it's just everyone's been so lovely, and we've been having such fun engaging with everyone as well. This has been my favorite part of the whole process.
Well, I mean, I have to say that I watch a lot of movies for work, and as much as possible, I don't really enjoy watching movies on my laptop because I associate that with work.
Yeah.
So when I watched this, I watched it on the big screen TV, and then I watched it on my laptop. And this is probably one of the very few movies that I enjoy on the laptop, simply because it feels, you feel that claustrophobia, you feel that isolation more. It obviously plays there. And then something that is I think, I don't know, you tell me if this was sort of exciting as a creator, is that the movie itself runs the length of a non-subscription Zoom call, you know,
pretty much
to the minute. So I think it's a 50-minute call that you can get without upgrading. Was that a challenge for you to work within that confine, or was it actually encouraging for you as a filmmaker, because you knew this was the rule, this was the box you had to play in?
It was great. And like, you know, we run slightly over the Zoom time. It kind of takes place in movie time, so it's a bit elastic. But no, I mean, I think it was I mean, I'd love to see more movies at this length, because I think the expectation placed on them, from a narrative point of view, is much less. I feel like if this was a 90-minute movie, there'd be things that we'd have to explore because of audience expectation that I just don't care about. Like, we'd have to explore a bit more about the backstory with Gemma and Haley, and we'd have to have a bigger payoff for that. We'd have to explore a bit more of the demon mythology. We'd have to, you know, do something more with the rules. And to be honest, that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I want characters that I relate to, put in terrifying situations, and I want to feel like I'm there with them moment to moment. And that's all I wanted to do with this movie. And I think maybe it hasn't got that much of an unusual structure, but it's basically just an escalation. It's basically just, the only thing we were looking to do was moment to moment, keep asking ourselves, like, how would this really go down? What's the most authentic choice we can make here as things slowly get crazier and crazier? And not thinking about, well, how do we pay off this emotional arc, which is important. And I love movies that are more conventionally structured like that. But to be honest, like, if a ghost is chasing you and killing off your friends, it's not maybe the time to like come to terms with, some childhood trauma, or to talk about your feelings. It's, there are lots of movies that feel like they just crowbar in this, this huge emotional character journey, when actually what I want to do is feel like I'm there with the characters in that visceral situation. And I love movies that do this. Why I love siege movies so much is because it feels like they really play with that sense of real time. And I mean, I'm rambling now, but basically I feel like there's much more you can do in the name of realism in a shorter piece, without the audience feeling like they're being shortchanged.
Yeah, sure. I mean, sometimes that backstory can feel a little shoehorned in, finding out that the father dressed up as Santa Claus and died in the chimney on Christmas Eve. Although it works in Gremlins. It works in Gremlins.
Everything works in Gremlins, but that's
Yeah.
Gremlins. That plays by its own rules.
Yeah, right. Was there, I mean, with that said, though, was there any kind of scene or anything that you did film or was in sort of the rough
Yeah.
script that ended up just getting cut, didn't work?
We filmed a moment before Haley gets dragged off down a hallway towards the end. We had a moment where Gemma and Haley have a much bigger confrontation, and it just didn't work. It just felt like we were suddenly going into a movie, and the rest of the time, all I'd been looking for is these unplanned, unscripted, these kind of genuine reactions from all of the actors, and they'd given such brilliant performances, and everything was so believable. You know, in a large part just down to them and how they carried the movie, that it just felt like suddenly we were steering into something that was scripted and something that was contrived. And I mean, it's the only thing that we just cut wholesale. And I much prefer it. And I feel like the movie that we're making, this very grounded, very realistic, you know, hopefully fan footage movie, two friends, you know, who've been at each other's throat a little bit, doing an elbow bump at the end. That's enough for me. That's enough for me that she decides to, you know, she's been a little, you know, Gemma's character has been a little self-involved and makes the decision to go out and to try and rescue her friend. That's kind of enough for me. I'm fine, you know, if a horror movie is well constructed, I'm fine with characters only moving millimeters in terms of their emotional journey. That's enough. As long as you see the start of something, the start of a change, that's fine for me. And that's the only scene that we cut wholesale. I mean, you know, we had a lot of other backstory stuff that we knew in the back of our heads that was subtext, but we never filmed it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it plays. You feel the tension, and then you obviously, you know, see the payoff of the elbow bump towards the end.
The other thing I'll say is, the other thing I say is, like, and this is why this film was such a joy to make over doing like TV, because in TV you get a script and you have to shoot every word, and you have to shoot, you know, 7 pages a day, and you have to, you know, you just have to get it shot, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't work on the day, you still have to shoot every letter of the script pretty much. But what's great about directing is you plan and you plan and you plan, you worry, is the audience going to feel this? Is this going to be clear enough? And if you're working with great actors, like, you know, like we had on this one, you get there and the actors just do it. It's there in the way they play the scene. It's there in the subtext, and you don't actually need them to explain it. And you can actually just get a red pen, cross out a lot of the script, because great actors bring all of that anyway. And so by the time we got to that confrontation between the two of them, it was like, we know already. We don't need them to say it. We know because you've just acted it moment by moment.
Well, you mentioned, obviously, since this is streaming on Shudder, it's a platform that speaks directly to the horror fan.
Yeah.
I mean, that partnership, I could see with certain other channels, networks, streaming studios, they might want a little bit more of that. They might want this to be stretched out to 90 minutes or 2 hours. They might want more of that exposition. Talk a little bit about the relationship with Shudder, and were they just encouraging of you doing things the way you wanted to do them?
Oh yeah, Shudder are the absolute best. Shudder basically were the only people who got what we wanted to do with this. They were the only people who saw that you would stifle this project by trying to apply the usual framework of production onto it. That we had to have the freedom to figure this out as we went along. We'd never have a script. We'd never have a conventional shooting structure. We'd be finding out what worked and what didn't, and how the process would how the process operated, and we do all that just by diving in the deep end and doing it. And Shudder really got on board with that, and they had great thoughts and they had great notes, but there was nothing that was prescriptive, and they totally let the movie be what it wanted to be, because that's the thing. When you get into the edit, the movie tells you how long it wants to be, and you're either fluffing it up to get it to a longer runtime, or you're chopping out good stuff to get it to a shorter runtime. But you know, the original pitch was that we do it as something around 40 minutes, because that's what a free Zoom call is. But actually, like in the contract with Shudder, I made sure to stipulate that it might even be 30 minutes, because I had no idea if we were able to get like enough good footage from shooting remotely.
Mhm.
We had no idea if any of this was going to work at all. So I didn't want to like promise them a feature film and not have enough good footage. But they were, and then they were fine with it running in this weird kind of like hybrid length. So, that just the best partners we could have had on this, and I don't think we could have done it anywhere else in the same way.
Well, just a couple more questions before we wrap up. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
say that, you have clearly this awareness of the paranormal community or of the studies. And I think I would go so far as to say that I think you have a good sense of sort of gothic horror storytelling and then that creeping dread. Just in your future projects, is this something that you want to continue to pursue? You want to play more in this paranormal sandbox, or you want to go off into a different kind of subgenre of horror, or what do you kind of want to do?
I've got a kind of bucket list of horror genres that I want to tick off. I mean, we did the same team as this. We made a short film called Dawn of the Deaf a few years ago, which is a kind of sci-fi zombie movie. And I love zombie movies. George Romero was a big hero of mine. That was on my tick list. We're doing that as a feature film. We've got another film called Salt, which is a kind of it's kind of like a creature feature, which was originally that was a 2-minute short film, and we've got that set up, so we're doing that, and that's ticking off my creature feature. I've always wanted to do a great found footage movie, so hopefully Host ticks that off, and I think the paranormal space is somewhere that I'm going to be interested in, because it's what like rattles me the most. If I wake up at 3 in the morning and can't get back to sleep, it's thoughts of the paranormal that keep me up. Even though I probably should be more scared of human beings, it's a different kind of fear, and I think you can scare the bejesus out of people with paranormal horror while also keeping it fun and not too heavy. Like Sam Raimi's a big hero of mine, and I think he's just able to strike that balance with something like Drag Me to Hell, where it's fun and it's like being on a ghost train ride, but also the scares are so fucking good, and he just absolutely knows how to play the audience like a fiddle. And I love horror. I'd happily work in horror for the rest of my life.
Why do you think? Why do you think that there's an increased kind of people are reporting more hauntings and things from home during quarantine, and you can kind of look at it from a psychological standpoint, or you can look at it from a paranormal theory standpoint. But why do you think that might be happening? What, your take on it?
Well, we're so busy in our lives, we probably don't. I think probably if ghosts do exist, and again, I haven't seen anything that feels definitive to me, but if they do exist, I'm sure their influence on our world would be subtle, and something, things that people wouldn't you maybe wouldn't be able to pick up on if they're rushing in and out of the house. And I think maybe just being in a space and getting a feel for the space and how it sounds and how it feels, you're just more tuned in to listen out for those signs. I mean, that would be my guess. Yeah,
it's certainly an interesting kind of idea that normally you're going to work in the middle of the day, and maybe that's when your ghost comes out to play.
Maybe it's like Toy Story.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you do have a creepy clown marionette in Host.
Yeah, well, that was just Teddy's. That was just, his house is creepy as shit. So we were just like, I got all the cast to send me like little tours of their house, and I was just like, oh, Caroline's got a creepy attic, Haley's got a creepy hallway, Teddy's got puppets on his wall for some reason, that's got to go in there. So it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, that definitely looks like something that's going to come alive and eat his soul or something.
Definitely.
So just keep the Zoom going for him. Keep recording and document it when it happens.
Yeah.
Rob, we're pretty much at the end of our time, but man, I really want to appreciate you for joining this. Give Rob a follow at Director DIR Rob Savage on Twitter. Are you also on Instagram?
Yeah, I think it's the same on Instagram.
Same one on Instagram. And also, Host is now streaming on Shudder. And I also want to thank Den of Geek for putting this little chat on. And you can give me a shout at Aaron Sagers everywhere. So, Rob, man, I really enjoyed Host. I think that it really not only is something that captures the moment, I think it's just a great new installment in the horror genre, and something that, we need horror right now. We need horror
Yeah,
films. You know, the world is kind of scary outside, so we need horror films to take us away from that and be a catharsis on its own.
absolutely. And I just want to say thank you to all of the people who have reached out and shared messages with us and told us that they enjoyed the film. Like, it really does mean the world to us, and we never expected any of this. So thanks to you guys as well.
All right, Rob. Thanks so much, man, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Happy spookies. Oh.